This week, we will continue work on Java FX GUI. We will add event-driven programming on our GUI. What means event-driven programming? From the last week, we can add the different shape or node into our GUI, but our GUI cannot really interact with the user. So if we want to interact and process the user input, we need to add event-driven programming. What does event-driven programming mean? For example, here is our GUI, right? So after we talk about how to add GUI component in Java FX, you can do that. Because now you can see here the GUI display, you can think about, yes, we need to have a grid pane. So then here we have different label. Then to get the user input, we can have the text field. But last week, did you remember, actually even you add the text field, we can have the user enter the value, but we didn't process. So now, for example, here we have a long calculator GUI. So we ask the user, please enter the information. So as a user, actually, when you see you tap into the text field, so you can guide by this label, you know you will enter your interest rate. So here for the number of years, you know you will enter the integer for the years. So the loan amount, for example, we will make the loan for $1,000. So then here, actually, even you have the space, right? But then when we move to here, user will find out, actually, they cannot type anything. So then you will see, oh, that's the information they need. So then we see the button, we will click on that. So then you will see your total payment and the monthly payment being displayed and calculated. So as the user, you will know when you see those GUI interfaces, you know you need to enter some information. And when you click the button, afterward, they will give you the result. So this one is we call the event-driven programming. Because as the programmer, you know, the first thing you need to have your GUI ready, what information you want to get from user. So for these two columns, you know you don't need the user input. Actually, that's your output later. So that's why you will disable this text field only for the display purpose. So then you are expecting when user click the calculate button, then you will read the user input. You will get user input for 3% interest rate for 5 years and loan amount 1,000. Then you calculate and display the monthly interest and the total payment. So that's we say the program, we will process the user input. So user input actually came from they click the button. So after the button is clear, it's click. So then we will process the data. So that's what we call event-driven. Because without user enter the button, we don't know when we will start to read the user input. So then we don't know, then we should process data and display in the output. So that's what we call the event-driven programming. So when you have the GUI, the first thing we need to display the GUI. The second thing, we need to predict how user will do. Or we should say we guide the user, they should click the button. After the button click, that's our event being created. So then we will, after the user create or launch the event, so then we process the data, then we display the information. So the next one, we will see how should we add the event-driven programming into our GUI. To handle the GUI event, we have 3 important components. The first thing we call source object. Like earlier, we know user will enter the button. So click on the button. This button actually is our source object. Which object will have the user launch the event. So then we can start processing. So this one we call the event source object. Usually they be a button. Or sometimes you see even a text field, we can consider they are an event source object. Because sometimes we even don't have button, we just let the user type the value. So once user enter the value and press the enter key, so then we process our event. So that's why here it depends on how your GUI designed to allow the user to touch that object. We call that the source object. And this source object, they will launch the event. So then we have the event object. Once user touch the source object, we have the event object. So this event object actually is the event they including some information. So usually we have the action events, we have mouse events, we have key event. So these three types of event we will talk about in this week. So the first one, we just use the action event, for example. So the action event, that's mean you have the specific source object, like the button, text field. So once the event is launched, so then we create the event object. And sometimes you have mouse event, your key event. But the mouse event, because mouse, you have many different action. You can click the mouse. You can right click, double click, single click. So even you're all using the mouse as the event, but mouse event object actually contain many information. Which button, how many click. Or you say the key event. The same thing, the key is from the keyboard, but the keyboard depends on how they enter. So all those information is in the event object. After you have event object, like earlier we said, we need to read the user input and process user input and display the output. So this important thing is we call the listener object. So this listener object also we can, that's the handler. So in this handler, you will define how you will process that event. So after you have these three components to handle GUI event, and one important thing is your handler object, they will process the user input and display the result in the GUI. And the most important thing, each handler have process different action event. They have two requirements you need to meet. So this handler event, they must be an instance of the event handler. That means they are inherited from the event handler. And actually, event handler actually is an interface. It's the interface. So that's why you know whenever you try to inherit it from the interface, right? That means you have some abstract method you need to override. So that's why this event handler, you have specific abstract method you need to fulfill that. So usually you specify in there how you will process the user input and display the result. Then after you have this handler object, you need to make sure the event handler object has to be registered with the source object. For example, we know earlier we click the button, so we process the event. So that's why your handler object needs to register to your button object. So now the next one we will see how should we define our handler object and also how should we register to the button. So that's we just use a very simple GUI display here to see how should we implement the event handler and also how should we register the listener to the source object. So in the GUI display, we have two buttons. When I click the OK button in the console, the OK button click, this message will be displayed. So if I click the cancel button in the console, they will say the cancel button is clicked. So actually you can see I have two buttons. They process differently. So that's why I need to write one event handler register to the OK button. So that's why I can display OK button click message. Then I have another source object cancel button. So this cancel button, I also need to write another listener object to display the cancel button click message. And also they will register to the cancel button. So when you write your program, the first thing, don't forget, you always to write the program how your GUI will display. So then the second thing, you need to identify what's your source object that's used to interact with your GUI. For example, here I have OK button and cancel button. I display that in the GUI, and both of them actually is the source object. So then we implement our event handler class. So each one registers to the source object. So we see how should we implement the event handler class. So the first thing, we need to have a GUI ready. So that's why to write the GUI, we have the handle events class extend from the application. So from last week, you remember we will have a start method passing by a stage. One stage include one scene. So one scene have one parent. So then you know how to create the OK button and cancel button. So we skip that method. So after that, you will add that to the pen. So that's why our stage will show. So the GUI display like that, right? Okay, so that's from last week. So then this week you will see how you will create the event handler. So that's why here we have two handlers. One is OK handler. So each event handler, they are inherited from the event handler interface. So that's why we see this class, I implement event handler. So that's an action event. So then in this event handler, remember I told you they are interfaces, right? So they have a handle method. So passing the action event. So E just the object name. So then here in the handle method, you just will see how you will process that event. So here after I click the OK button, I just display the OK button in the console. So this one is earlier we called the event listener. So this event listener, they need to register to the OK button. So the first thing, we need to create this event handler method. So event handler object. So then to register to the OK button, we just use the set on action. So to register a handler to the source object, we're using the set on action method. So they can register the handler object to the source object. So that's why when you click on the OK button, so then that's how they will display. So when you click on the OK button, so then the handler is registered to the OK button. So once we feel this button being clicked, so that's why the action will be create the event object. So the event object will pass into the listener. So then they will invoke the handler method. So that's why OK button being clicked is displayed in the console. So the same thing for the cancel button, cancel handler class. So the same thing, if you have the cancel button, you need to have the cancel handler class as well. So they will display cancel button is click. So that's why we have the other class we call, this one is for the cancel handler object. So they will register to the cancel button. We're using the set on action. So that's the simple instruction about the event handler registration and how to handle event.